Hi, I'm watching every single version of Pride and Prejudice. Let's go! I'll be going in chronological order, so that means I'll be starting with the 1940s version because it's the first one that we still have. Starring Greer Garson and Laurence Olivier, and the screenplay was written by Aldous Huxley, which is very strange to me. This movie is very 1940s, so if that's not your thing, I don't recommend watching it. I, however, did really enjoy it, and it's not too bad of an adaptation of the first half of the book. The first proposal doesn't even come in until an hour and 20 minutes in, and this is only a 2-hour film. So the second half of the book and the resolution to the entire movie gets very much shoved together and rushed. I did think this movie was enjoyable, so as a movie, I'm going to give it a 7.6 out of 10. As an adaptation, I really can't give it more than like a 5.5 because it really only adapts the first half of the book. If you want to hear my specific likes and dislikes, check out my next video. Here are my likes and dislikes for the 1940s Pride and Prejudice. Greer Garson is a fantastic Elizabeth Bennet. I like the balance that she finds, and she has great chemistry with Laurence Olivier as Darcy. While not completely book accurate, is just such a massive simp for this Elizabeth. It's kind of amazing. This guy who absolutely is not playing the violin, it's so funny. The fact that Aldous Huxley wrote the screenplay for this, like, Aldous Huxley? Mary Boland truly is a fantastic Mrs. Bennet. I didn't like the opening scene. It's completely useless and takes up 10 minutes of screen time that could have gone elsewhere. Like the ending scene, which is just so rushed, and apparently Lady Catherine likes Elizabeth and wants her to marry Darcy in this version. I don't know. This Colonel Fitzwilliam is absolutely useless and did not need to be here, but I kinda am glad that he's here because he's in a kilt! Why is he in a kilt? Like the first proposal with Mr. Collins. This movie could not pick its time period to save its life, but the costumes are gorgeous. Harry also has a random parrot, which I don't know why he's here, but overall, likes and dislikes. Hi, I'm watching every single version of Pride and Prejudice. Today, I'll be taking a look at the 1957 Italian miniseries Pride and Prejudice. Quick disclaimer, I watched this in Italian without subtitles, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. Let's just say that there were some, confusing choices in this version. Mr. Wickham was in a whole bunch more than he is in the book, to the point where I think he might have had more screen time than Lizzie did. And the order in which they put some things, well, they technically included most of the things from the book, the order in which they did it was a little strange. Besides the confusing choices, this version also wasted a lot of time. There were a lot of scenes that just dragged on forever, and some scenes that were just entirely useless. So for personal enjoyment, I'm going to give it a 5.9. In adaptation, I'm going to give it a 5. Check out tomorrow to see my specific likes and dislikes. Here are my likes and dislikes for the 1950s Italian Pride and Prejudice. I liked this Mr. Bennet. I honestly think he was a great portrayal of the character. Not gonna lie, I kind of love this version of Collins, but he has a weird relationship with Charlotte where it's kind of consensual, and also they chose a weird order to put things in. For example, the Collins proposal was before the ball and marriage. Again, I couldn't really understand what they were saying, but I'm like 90% certain that there wasn't actually a first proposal, which there wasn't a letter. There definitely wasn't a letter, but there wasn't a first proposal. I was just genuinely very confused. Neither the Lizzie nor the Darcy made a huge impact on me, but this scene of them playing piano together was kind of cute. I forgot to take a picture, but they cut Kitty out and they kind of smushed her together with Mary, where she had Mary's name and Kitty's personality. Also, they changed Jane's name to Jenny. I'm pretty sure just because it sounded better in Italian, but the biggest flaw of this version was there was too many conversations that were only between men. There were multiple scenes between like Wickham and another male character that just weren't in the book and took up way too much time and were completely unnecessary. Hi, I'm watching every single version of Pride and Prejudice. Today, I will be looking at the 1961 Dutch adaptation to the Dochters Bennet, which translates to The Four Daughters Bennet. This version is also important because apparently it came from the same script that the lost 1950s versions came from. And so far, it is the most accurate portrayal of Pride and Prejudice. It hits almost all of the major points. They change things a little bit over here and there, and it's a fun mini-series. Honestly, it's really enjoyable, and if you would like to watch it, it is for free on YouTube with English subtitles, which after the last installment just feels so great. And I had a great time watching it, so for my score, I'm going to give it a 7.7. Adaptation, I'm going to give it an 8. If you want to see my likes and dislikes, check out my video tomorrow. Here are my likes and dislikes for the Dochters Bennet. Starting out with my likes, I really like this version of this Darcy. He really hit the nice combination of mean but funny. I also really like the Bingley. There was a part where he literally jumped through the window and I had a great time with that. There were a lot of fun intros in this, including a song and diary entries from all the Bennet sisters, which I think was a great storytelling device. Finally, we get to go to Pemberley. No other version has had it so far. What gives? I'm glad it was here though. There's Colonel Fitzwilliam. Kinda cute. I like them. This version also mentions waffles. Getting into my dislikes, all the sisters were kinda weak. And also, they tried to smush the first proposal and the letter together. Lizzie would kill him. Yet again, they cut Kitty, but then again, the Mary was essentially Kitty, but with Mary's name. She had all Kitty's characteristics, so George Wickham, not pictured here, is kind of obvious. You're sus on him from Go. This version actually has another field ball, but doesn't have Lizzie and Darcy dance. It doesn't offer a substitution. You never actually learn Darcy's name in this version, which I would normally just ignore, but they bring it up! Hi, I'm watching every single version of Pride and Prejudice. Today I'm taking a look at the 1967 BBC 6-episode miniseries. Now, unfortunately, the full version of this is only available at the BFI in London, and as I am nowhere near London, I was not able to watch the full thing. I was able to watch the final 2 of the 6 episodes and a couple of clips from the first 4. So I still have some thoughts, but I can't rank it as an adaptation. This version, despite being a miniseries, really said let's speed run it. Most of the dialogue is taken directly from the book, but the way that the actors do it is very much as a presentation, and they have a very posh received pronunciation accent that often feels like recitation rather than actually acting. But it is the closest so far, even if it felt like a little very fast paced. So my personal score, I think I'm gonna give it a 6. Here are my likes and dislikes for the 1967 Pride and Prejudice. Now again, I was not able to watch the full version, so take all of this with a grain of salt. But I seem to probably would have liked their Lizzie. She seemed impertinent enough. It also seems to take most of its dialogue directly from the book, so that's a point in its favor. This one gets a bonus point because it has my favorite scene in all of Pride and Prejudice in it, and it almost never makes it into adaptation, but it was in this one. On to my dislikes. Again, it felt very rushed and fast-paced, probably because even though there was 6 episodes, the episodes were only 25 minutes long, so it made things seem very fast because you had to keep going to fit everything in. This version also chose a different route, and instead of cutting Kitty, they cut Mary, and Kitty did seem to be Kitty, so it was fully cutting Mary. You can sort of see it here, but it was very 60s hair and makeup. Everyone had such floofy hair. Hi, I'm watching every single version of Pride and Prejudice. Today I'm taking a look at the 1980 BBC 5-episode miniseries. I'm going to be completely upfront on this one. I didn't like it. It technically was very book accurate, but there was no sparkle, no heart behind it. Barely anyone was giving it anything. I really didn't enjoy it, but it technically hit all the major beats, and a lot of the dialogue was taken from the book. Now, if the right characters were saying the lines, is a very different story. Now, you can watch this series if you have Amazon Prime, but I wouldn't recommend it. It's not something that I think I will ever go back and watch again. So for my score, I am going to give it a 5. And for adaptation score, I'm going to give it an 8.5. Check out to see all my dislikes tomorrow. There are a few likes. Don't worry. Here are my likes and dislikes for the 1980s Pride and Prejudice. Starting out with the few likes I had, I liked this Bingley. He was a good Bingley boy. Though you can't see them all here, they did have all 5 Bennet sisters. And I'll give them a point for having relatively accurate script, even if I don't like the way they went about it. The Charlotte was also pretty good. On to my dislikes. A lot of my issues with this one stem from the pacing. Even though it's shorter, it feels long. The Darcy's way too stiff. I know Darcy's a character, you have to play with some subtlety, but I don't believe I saw him change this facial expression until halfway through the 4th episode. There were a lot of voiceovers showcasing Lizzie's inner monologue, but then it was just so visually uninteresting, it was tedious. I also just didn't like this Lizzie. She had no sparkle, no wit, she was too quiet, and she was way too into Wickham. She was legitimately upset when Wickham got engaged to Mary King and like, honey! He's not even worth it. They also changed the part where Darcy would come in after Lizzie has read the letter about Lydia. Instead, she goes and runs to Pemberley and she's like, oh, why does Darcy have to know? Like, it's your fault! You ran to— Hi, I'm watching every single version of Pride and Prejudice. And today I get to talk about Wishbone! Now, for those of you who don't know, this is Wishbone. He is a Jack Russell Terrier who translated a lot of classic stories and told them to children by inserting himself into roles in a TV show and in books during the 1990s. So in 1995, he did an episode entitled First Impressions, making a pun based off of the original title of Pride and Prejudice, First Impressions. I absolutely adore this version because Wishbone plays Mr. Darcy, and look at him! He's so cute! Now, is it the most accurate version of Pride and Prejudice? No, it's told in 30 minutes for children. And the main theme of the episode is to not believe rumors that you hear. But that being said, it's still pretty great and cultivating a young love of Austen. So 10 out of 10 from me and an adaptation score of only like 4. Here are my likes and dislikes for the Wishbone adaptation of Pride and Prejudice. Starting off with my likes, I think Wishbone actually makes a pretty good Mr. Darcy. They tone down his meanness from the book because this is for children. But the initial insult is taken straight from the book and you legitimately see how it affects Elizabeth. I think it's a good change. Also, whatever Caroline Bingley is doing, I don't know what it is, but I'm vibing with her. It's great. I couldn't get any pictures though, I'm sorry. Also, the Elizabeth is pretty good. She's, you know, general, sweet, and charming, and for a condensed version, pretty accurate. Here's the Elizabeth, by the way. Now, as for my dislikes, I have to hold it to a different standard because it is a different target audience, and it has a much shorter runtime. It's only 30 minutes, and not even all that is devoted to Pride and Prejudice. That being said, I wish it was longer just because it's so darn cute. And my one legitimate critique is that they make Darcy only not like Jane because of the position her family's in, rather than not believing that she shares a mutual affection with Bingley, which kind of makes it worse in the book. But other than that, I love it, yay! Hi, I'm watching every single version of Pride and Prejudice. And today I get to talk about the 1995 6-episode BBC miniseries starring Jennifer L. and Colin Firth. Now, while this was not my first Pride and Prejudice adaptation, it is one of my favorites. It sticks very closely to the book, while I think also keeping the spirit in it. Other people think it's too stiff. I would point them to the 1980s version. This one has a lot of wit and heart, and I really love this portrayal of the characters. It's really great on my part, and it is so book accurate. I may have a bias towards this version because I've always loved it, but I genuinely think it is worth checking out if you have not checked it out already. So for my score, I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10. And for adaptation score, I'm going to give it a 9.5. It's so good. So check out tomorrow to see my specific likes and dislikes. Here are my likes and dislikes for the 1995 Pride and Prejudice. I can write sonnets about how much I love this version, but let's begin with the Elizabeth Bennet, who I absolutely adore. She really captures the wit and the sparkle that the character needs. And the Darcy is just as equally good, capturing both the haughtiness and the sensitivity of the character, making you really believe in his character arc. This is also the first adaptation to, I feel, really utilize its medium. There's some excellent tracking shots that are used to tell the story. The pacing in this is also fantastic. Each episode starts really well and ends at a very specific point in the novel. It just works. This version is just also very smart in what it chooses to cut and what it chooses to keep, making it a tighter story overall. All of the secondary characters are doing a great job. I love them. They're all giving their A game, from the Bennets to the Gardners to Caroline Bingley to Mr. Collins. It's great! I love it! With the exception of this guy, George Wickham, who you're kind of sus from the start on. Also, this scene in particular makes it lose a point because every time I watch it with people, they're like, what's going on? And I have to explain it to them. Hi, I'm watching every single version of Pride and Prejudice. Today, I'm watching the 2001 movie Bridget Jones's Diary, starring Renee Zellweger, Hugh Grant, and Colin Firth yet again as Darcy. See, people forget this is a Pride and Prejudice adaptation, but it is! So with this movie, I actually begin the modern adaptations of Austen, which I will have to look at differently, just to be fair to the movie, because it already loses so many points for not being in period. Instead, I will be judging it based off of how it adapts the plot into modern day, and also how it adapts the themes to make sure that they are still accurate to the book. All that being said, Bridget Jones's Diary does a tolerable job at adapting Pride and Prejudice into modern day, with the one big exception that Bridget Jones is not Elizabeth Bennet, nor is she really meant to be, but you can find allegories for all the other characters in Pride and Prejudice for the most part. And it's a fun watch, so I'm gonna give it an 8, but adaptation, I'm only gonna give it like a 5. Here are my likes and dislikes for Bridget Jones's Diary. Yet again, Colin Firth knocking it out of the park as another Darcy, playing both a Regency and a modern one. It's great! Hugh Grant also does a great job as a Wickham-esque character, and Me and Darcy have a fight scene. What's good? Finally we get to see Darcy deck Wickham. I just find the friend side character so enjoyable. So far, this is the version that lets the Caroline Bingley-esque character get the closest to actually bagging Darcy, so kudos to her! In both my likes and dislikes goes Bridget Jones herself, because she is a very enjoyable protagonist and you are definitely rooting for her, but she's not an Elizabeth Bennet, and can you truly adapt the story of Pride and Prejudice without an Elizabeth Bennet? But she's fun though. This movie can be very difficult to watch if you get secondhand embarrassment very easily. There were times where I had to pause and step aside before I could come back and finish it. Also, there's no Jane or Bingley characters, and I'm sad because I like them. Hi, I'm watching every single version of Pride and Prejudice. Today I'm discussing the 2003 movie Pride and Prejudice, a Latter-day Comedy, aka the Mormon version of Pride and Prejudice. Right, okay, so a little on the Mormon thing. I've had to watch many a religious film in my time on Earth, and there were points in this movie where I legitimately forgot that it was Mormon, but then they dropped something in there. I'm like, right, Mormon. Okay, strange choice, but alright. Honestly, this version is full of interesting choices. Lizzie is a little bit too not like other girls, and Darcy's a little bit too, right the entire time. Like, he's not that much of a dick. He's kind of correct. We'll get into a bit more of that when I get into my likes and dislikes. But for personal enjoyability, I'm gonna give it a 6.5. Check it out if you're curious. And for adaptation, I'm also gonna give it a 6.5. Here are my likes and dislikes for Pride and Prejudice, a Latter-day Comedy. Despite being basically a Latin stereotype, the Jane is probably the most well-rounded character in the entire movie. This version does, however, completely understand Mary Bennet. They just nail her. The best scene was probably the stand-in for the Pemberley scene. It just really worked. This is neither a like nor a dislike. I just noticed that this Lydia looks a lot like the one from the Lizzie Bennet diaries. Now on to my dislikes, starting with the Lizzie Bennet, who is just so not like other girls and is never gonna get her book published if she keeps up that attitude. The Wickham would have probably worked if the Lizzie didn't dislike him from the start. They undermined themselves. The Darcy is too right. During the confrontation scene, he doesn't actually say anything wrong. He's completely right. The Bingley is just dumb. There's nothing really charming about him. He's just stupid. A Spanish guitar plays a lot of the time Jane comes in the scene because she's exotic. Hi, I'm watching every single version of Pride and Prejudice. I'm looking at the 2004 movie Pride and Prejudice, also known as the Bollywood version of Pride and Prejudice. This was actually one of the most highly requested adaptations for me to look at, so I was super excited to check it out for myself, and let me tell you, it did not disappoint. It was a super fun watch, and I love Lolita as Lizzie Bennet, and I really enjoyed the way that they tried to update Austen's themes into this very specific context, and it almost works, but it suffers kind of the same problem that the 1940s version has, in that it tries to shove the entire climax, including the first proposal, in the last 20 minutes, so it kind of works against itself in that way. So, even though this version is very enjoyable, and I highly suggest you check it out for yourself, I'm gonna give it a 9 for enjoyability. I can only give it about a 6 for adaptation, which is higher than the 1940s version, because I think it does better in the first half. Here are my likes and dislikes for Pride and Prejudice. The Bingley character, Belraj, is a cutie patootie, and has a nice blend of being charming, but also calling Darcy out. The Elizabeth character, Lolita, perfectly encapsulates the character, her sparkle, her wit, and just everything about her. The songs slap! No Life Without Wife is going to be stuck in my head for a while. They really have some interesting ways on how to adapt Austen's themes into this context, but they don't have enough time and they kind of chicken out a little bit. So it's not fully explored, but there are some genuinely interesting adaptational decisions made. Which leads into my dislikes that the Lolita is a little bit too right when she calls this Darcy an imperialist. They obviously don't want you to think that he is, but they don't do a very good job at showing you that he's, you know, not an imperialist. The Lydia and Wickham running away, which while foreshadowed, doesn't really affect the plot and could have been dropped. I thought they were going to skip the first proposal, but nope, it just gets shoved into the last 20 minutes. Hi, I'm watching every single version of Pride and Prejudice. And it is time to look at the 2005 adaptation starring Keira Knightley and Matthew Macfadyen. I have a lot of conflicting opinions about this version. So on one hand, the cinematography is gorgeous and the music makes me swoon, and it's a very good adaptation to getting people who don't normally watch period adaptations to watch a period adaptation. But on the other hand, I find this version just too overly emotional, and it's not my thing. They make the Darcy too nice and the Lizzie a bit too silly, and it's just not something that I personally enjoy, and I wish it wasn't the version that everyone always knows and talks about, because as I have proven, there are many other different versions for you to look at. So keep that in mind when I say that my personal enjoyability score is only about a 6.5. You can like it more than I do, that is completely fine. And for adaptation, it's getting a 7.5 because it fudges some things with Wickham, and I have a lot of strong opinions about the second proposal. Here are my likes and dislikes for the 2005 Pride and Prejudice movie. This movie is truly gorgeous to watch and the score is phenomenal. The book snap is legitimately a great moment. The Bingley and Jane in this version are actually super cute and I really like both of their characters. I actually really like this version of Wickham, which frustrates me when they underutilize him. He does not come across as a threat to the story. Why are the Bennets poorer than they actually are in the text? The costumes actually aren't as bad as a lot of people give them credit for given the choices that they made in it, but the hair is abominable. I have said it before, I will say it again. They make the Darcy way too nice in this version, which just makes Elizabeth look so much worse. They replace scenes that actually exist in the text with scenes that try to get the same gist across but are worse. One example of this is the statue scene at Pemberley, which unintentionally gives off the exact opposite vibes that the scene is supposed to. I loathe this scene with my entire being. You've bewitched me body and soul is completely antithetical to Darcy's character arc, and it cuts out the most important thematic proposal in all of Austen. Hi, I'm watching every single version of Pride and Prejudice. And today I'm looking at the 2008 4-part miniseries, Lost in Austen. I hated this so much. I barely got through the first episode. I almost quit after that. But no, I continued, and it only got worse. The entire time I just felt like this is what people who hate Jane Austen think Jane Austen is like. It just misrepresents everything it is supposed to represent. Jane Austen fans, basic facts about the Regency era, basic facts about Pride and Prejudice, the characters, it's literally terrible. And that's why, for my score, it is only going to get a 2, and for adaptation, it is only going to get a 3, because it's essentially bad self-insert fanfiction that I wouldn't recommend to anyone. The Wishbone version beat this out in terms of adaptation. Here's all my dislikes for Lost in Austen that I can fit into a minute. Starting with my 1/2 like for the series, I didn't mind the Wickham until they made him into a good guy by having Georgiana lie about him assaulting her when he didn't want to because she was a child. Not a good look, hun. For someone who's professed to love Austen for 14 years of her life, she certainly doesn't seem like it. She seems generally surprised when she finds Darcy to be a prick. Like, honey, did we not read the same book? Literally no one seems actually concerned when Elizabeth goes missing without a word and some random chick appears in her place. Amanda also has big I'm the main character, so every male character has to fall in love with me vibes, and they all do. I really don't think these people actually read the book, but rather a synopsis of it because they get basic facts of the story wrong. Like, why are the Bingleys at Rosing? And why does Mr. Collins have a Puritan name? What? This version likes to pretend that it cares about propriety, but it actually doesn't. Either choose whether it matters or doesn't. Elizabeth is just fine staying in the modern age, separate from the family that she loves, her time, her morals, her values, her life. No, it's fine because modern. Amanda stays in the past and rejects reality, which is just hilarious to me because a different Austen novel has the exact opposite message. Do your research. Hi, I'm watching every single version of Pride and Prejudice. Today I finally get to talk about the 2012 to 2013 100 episode, give or take a few, web series, The Lizzie Bennet Diaries. Partially produced by TikTok's favorite, Hank Green. In the interest of full disclosure, I have to tell you guys, this is the first adaptation of Pride and Prejudice I ever watched. I legitimately can't tell you whether or not I finished the book or this first. They are so intrinsically linked in my mind. So, I definitely hold a special place in it in my heart. It does not mean it is not above criticism, but you know my biases. I'm so glad that because of this I got to rewatch it. It was certainly worth it. If you haven't checked it out already, go and check it out. It's on YouTube. So from me, it's going to get a 9, and for adaptation, it's going to get an 8 because I think it does a really good job at adapting the events and themes of Pride and Prejudice into its time. Here are my likes and dislikes for the Lizzie Bennet Diaries. I have to give kudos for this version for really getting all the little moments that even the best adaptations miss. There's parallels for everything. This one also has pretty good diversity. It's 2012 diversity, but it's pretty good nonetheless. I have to give it a shout out for being the most accessible version on this list, it being mostly hosted on YouTube. If you have internet, you can watch it. I really love the ways that they update the characters into a modern day, especially Lydia Bennet, because you cannot get away with being so unsympathetic towards her in a modern setting. This version also gets a point because it adapts my favorite scene, which the only other version that does it so far is the 60s. Okay, so sometimes the acting is a little hokey. It's very 2012 YouTube. Ever fall in love with, but it's still fun. Okay, actual critique here. The way that they try to update Lydia's elopement doesn't really work because it only has long-term consequences for Lydia. They try to do it with Jane, but there's no long-term consequences for Lizzie, making it a weaker adaptation choice. They might have chosen something better. Hi, I'm watching every single version of Pride and Prejudice. Today I'm looking at the first of 3 Hallmark movies that are allegedly based off of Pride and Prejudice. The first one is Unleashing Mr. Darcy, released in 2016. So of the 3 Hallmark movies, of which all 3 I have watched, this one is the one that sticks the closest to the plot of Pride and Prejudice. And that kind of makes it the worst. At least enjoyability-wise, because I'm like, you're so close, yet you're so far. But there are a lot of character parallels. There is a Bingley and a Jane character. There's a Caroline. They even got Lady Catherine in on this one. But the entire time I'm just kind of like, wow, this Elizabeth has no real reason to dislike the Darcy, but there are a lot of cute dogs, and that does get it at some point. So for my score, it's going to get a 4.5. It's a general run-of-the-mill Hallmark movie. Check it out if you're into those. And for adaptation, it's only going to get a 3. Here are my likes and dislikes for Unleashing Mr. Darcy. The Lady Catherine parallel and the Caroline parallel work very well as their characters within this story. The teen character Zara, who serves as your Georgiana Darcy, isn't as annoying as I would expect a Hallmark movie teen to be. There are loads of cute puppers in this. Look at them! I'd watch it for the dogs alone, and there's puppies in it! Aww. There was a joke about this character about how divorce suits her, and I don't know, I thought it was hilarious. Getting into my dislikes now, I don't know why they called him Donovan Darcy. If you're gonna give him a stupid name, you might as well keep the one that Austen gave him. I really don't understand why this Elizabeth doesn't like this Darcy. Like, yeah, he made a kind of rude comment because she was late to something. So it's kind of her own fault, but she is just so upset with him, like, for most of the film for nothing. I don't know. The ethics of Lizzie's subplot of possibly getting fired from the private school that she works at because she won't give this kid a passing grade is so messed up. That's not how things work in real life. Hi, I'm watching every single version of Pride and Prejudice. Today I'm talking about the 2016 movie Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, based upon the novel of the same name based off Pride and Prejudice. So I really don't like zombies. They are like the one horror monster that actually gets to me. So this was a bit of a trial to get through for me. That being said, I'm trying to focus on it as an adaptation. And for that, it doesn't really think very hard about how a zombie apocalypse would affect Regency England. You can see they are wearing long opera gloves, which just doesn't make sense to me. But it is meant to be more like a fantasy adventure thing. But I've heard it's also not that good of an adaptation of the book it's even based off, because there's a Pride and Prejudice and Zombies book, and then there's this movie, and it's not even a good adaptation of that. So for my score, I'm going to give it a 5. It was fine, but I will never be watching it again. And for adaptation, I don't know, like also 5? Here are my likes and dislikes for Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. Okay, you guys are right. Matt Smith is an excellent Mr. Collins. I mean Parson Collins. Bingley being an explosives expert because he does not like direct confrontation is the smartest thing that they did in this. Let's just say that this movie is very good for turn your brain off stupid fun. Elizabeth has taken quite a few stupid pills in this version given the choices that she makes. I am very confused by this Wickham's plan. His actions during the first, like, 2/3 of the movie do not match up with what he does in the climax. Also, he's not that good of a Wickham. There is an unhealthy amount of Orientalism in this movie. Yucky! This movie likes to pretend it's clever by including lines from the book, but they pay no attention to context or what the line means, so it doesn't really work. The initial insult didn't really work for me because this Elizabeth doesn't care about what she looks like and they just took it from the book. It would have made more sense to imply that she wasn't a good warrior. That would get to her. Hi, I'm watching every single version of Pride and Prejudice. Today I'm looking at the 2016 movie Before the Fall. This one's twist is that Elizabeth Bennet is played by a man, Ben Bennet, making it a queer relationship. Not a good one though. This film's biggest crime is that it's boring. Its second biggest crime is that it spends way too much time with the Darcy character's domestic abuse charge. Its third biggest crime is that Darcy is also combating figuring out that he's queer to the point where he denies being gay, but 3 minutes before the film ends. And then there's just a kiss and then it's all right. They also switch around the roles. Ben Bennett now really fulfills the role of Darcy, and Darcy more fulfills the role of Elizabeth Bennet, but neither of them do a good job at portraying the character. This film was fighting an uphill battle because Pride and Prejudice is a difficult story to adapt as a queer story, but they just chose every wrong decision along the way. So that's why for my personal enjoyment, it's only getting a 3.5, and for adaptation a 4. Here are my likes and dislikes for Before the Fall. Starting with the few good things I have to say about this movie, there are some really pretty shots because they spend a lot of time outside and hiking, so you get some nice outdoor shots. And these two characters, who were sort of kind of a stand-in for Kitty and Lydia, they had absolutely no effect on the plot. They were the only things that brought me joy. Now on to my dislikes. There is no way that this Darcy would get charged with a felony given the evidence presented and the way that the court systems exist. Especially since he didn't even freaking do it. I can't find any pictures of the two together, just know that Ben Bennett and George Wickham looked almost exactly alike, which did not help me because I got them confused. The pacing is so awful. It is so slow. Conversations that could happen in 2 minutes take place over the course of like 6, and it's tedious. Listen, if the only time your queer relationship has any sort of romantic interactions in the last 3 minutes, you did a bad job at showing a queer relationship. Hi, I'm watching every single version of Pride and Prejudice. Today, I'm talking about the 2018 Hallmark Christmas movie, Pride and Prejudice and Mistletoe. And before anyone asks, yes, it is Gretchen Wieners. This adaptation is really in name only. Despite it being the Hallmark movie that draws the most from the title of Pride and Prejudice, none of the plot is from it. First off, this is Darcy, this is Bennett, and neither of them really have the personality of their characters nor act like through it. It's your standard Hallmark Christmas movie, with the one exception of there is no Santa Claus. Big city girl, has an ex in the city, small town boy, owns a restaurant. It's a Hallmark Christmas movie. If those are your things, go and watch it, but it's just not Pride and Prejudice other than some of the names. So for my enjoyability, I don't know, like a 5, it was fine, like it wasn't bad. And then for adaptation, the best I can give it is a 1. Here are my likes and dislikes for Pride, Prejudice, and Mistletoe. Okay, so this movie might actually be the most difficult for me to judge because it's just not Pride and Prejudice, so I don't have any good way to like compare it, see what they did well, see what they didn't, because that's its biggest con. It's not Pride and Prejudice at all. It's a Hallmark movie. It's just a Hallmark movie. I will say I don't have any like big objections to this movie. It's just sort of fine. Like, it's fine. Like, the characters are fine. The plot is fine. It's nothing exceptional, but you know, I wasn't expecting that. I don't know, this is difficult. So I guess I thought this movie a little bit clever for the name that they gave the gender bent Bingley character, but then I found out that in the book that this movie is based off of, that's actually a queer couple, so bad on you, movie, for cutting that out. This movie's like second biggest disadvantage is just that it's kind of meh overall. It's very middle of the road. I'm sorry if you were expecting like more in depth, but I really can't. Hi, I'm watching every single version of Pride and Prejudice. And today I'm talking about the 2019 Hallmark Christmas movie, Christmas at Pemberley Manor. It's the last Hallmark movie! Yes! And yet again, it's not really Pride and Prejudice. I will give it this though. At least some of the characters seem to have similar personalities to the characters they're meant to be parallel to. So like the Darcy does seem like a Darcy, and the Caroline Bingley actually works as a pretty good Caroline Bingley. But like the story, it's a Hallmark Christmas movie! Yet again! Think of it as sort of like an AU, I'd have no clue. Again, if you're into Hallmark Christmas movies, you'll probably like it. But like, I'm only gonna give it like a 5, an adaptation of 1.5, because I think it does better than the previous one. Here are my likes and dislikes for Christmas at Pemberley Manor. Again, baseline, not really Pride and Prejudice, but this version does take characteristics from those characters and puts it onto them. Like, this Darcy definitely has some Darcy-like tendencies, like insociability. The parallel for Bingley is also super sweet and I think works really well. You can't really see it here, but he dresses like an elf, and it's great. Also, Santa's here, and yes, that's the real Santa. Caroline Bingley actually really worked as a Caroline Bingley. She was trying to like court Darcy's business away from Elizabeth, even though they're like so good together. Elizabeth really didn't seem like Elizabeth. She was pretty much just your standard Hallmark protagonist, but like she wasn't unenjoyable. Okay, so this is George. He's not Wickham, but honestly, he ends up getting shafted by the narrative because he has a crush on Elizabeth the entire time, and it's not like they're bad together, but he just gets dropped and ends up alone. Good for him. Hi, I'm watching every single version of Pride and Prejudice. And today I'm looking at the 2018 Lifetime movie Pride and Prejudice Atlanta. This cast is entirely black. And you know what? It's fine. It's a very surface level adaptation of Pride and Prejudice, so it doesn't really get into like how things would work in this context, which is fine. It doesn't have to. A lot of the other versions on this list didn't do that either. But for what it is, it's enjoyable and it's fun and it's perfectly fine. Is the Darcy a little too charming? Yes. Is the Wickham not enough of a scumbag? Yes. But I think it does a better job than the Hallmark movies, and so that's why for my score it's going to get a 6.7, and then for adaptation it's going to get a 5.5, because it hits like most of the major beats, but it doesn't really go into anything deeper than that. That's all I got. Here are my likes and dislikes for Pride and Prejudice Atlanta. This Mrs. Bennet had me laughing within the first 2 minutes by referring to Caroline Bingley as that sister of his. I actually really liked how they did Mr. Collins in this version because they got that Collins is kind of low-key respectable. I also like how the Darcy separated Jane and Bingley in this version. I think it really worked and showed the same things that it was meant to show in the original book. I also didn't like how they did the initial insult in this version because it's more about who's Darcy saying it to, because it's not Bingley, than it is what he actually says. Because most that he says is, she's not my type, which isn't that rude. Okay, but this Darcy's just a little bit overall too charming. A, he's trying to be a politician, but the entire time he's just kind of like, Lizzie girl, you're kind of being too harsh on him. He's fine. I also didn't like how they did Lydia's elopement because Wickham's not a scumbag. So when Lydia gets pregnant, there's like no tension because she has the support of her family and you know Wickham's gonna come back. So there's just absolutely no tension there. Hi, I'm watching every single version of Pride and Prejudice. And today I'm looking at the 2019 musical Pride and Prejudice that you can watch on Amazon Prime. Yeah, about that. I know a lot of people were like, oh, this is so fun and so good. I didn't like it. I didn't think it was that good of an adaptation or musical. I didn't think it was a good musical. There were too many song soliloquies. It just really wasn't my type. The musical sounded the same to me, and they made some very interesting choices. I was really hoping that I would like this version because I desperately wanted to, but I just couldn't bring myself to enjoy it. So my score, it's only gonna get like a 4.5, and for adaptation, no, give it a 6.7. It did an alright job. It hit the major beats, but it got some things weird. Here are my likes and dislikes for Pride and Prejudice, a new musical. Mary as a sort of narrator was actually kind of funny, and I think this version actually understood her character. I actually enjoyed this Mr. Collins. He had some of the more fun songs and scenes. Oh, I did like the Jane. And she was 15! Literally had me cackling. It was so stupid. Speaking of him, he was fun to watch, but he wasn't a Darcy. I really did not like the Lizzie. She's such a pop feminist take on the character, and I'm so tired of seeing those. Now, this is me being a theater critic for a second, because I don't like musicals where all the songs are only internal dialogue. Use the songs to progress the story. The best songs in this are the one that did that. I don't think this version understood Bingley. He's not tongue-tied. He's ebullient and joyful, and that's kind of the point. What? I didn't care about Charlotte or Lydia in this version. They wanted me to, but they didn't actually do anything to make me care about them. These costumes get a no from me. The songs all sounded the same! The choice to have Lizzie narrate in the beginning was a dumb one. Either do it throughout or preferably don't do it. Hi, I'm watching every single version of Pride and Prejudice. Today, I'm going to be talking about Hulu's new movie, Fire Island. I finally got around to watching it. I'm sorry to everyone who wants a Sensibility series. I'm working on it. Anyway, Fire Island is the second of 2 queer Jane Austen adaptations based off of Pride and Prejudice, and this one is infinitely the better one. And I have a few nitpicks in terms of adaptation, but in terms of movie quality, this is top tier. Now here's the thing, they had an uphill battle from go. I think Pride and Prejudice is the most difficult Jane Austen novel to make queer, and I think they did the best that they could given the situation, and hopefully it will lead to more queer Jane Austen adaptations to love and enjoy. And again, it's a top tier movie, so for my enjoyability, it's getting a 10 out of 10, and for adaptation, I'm only gonna give it a 5. But I still like it, it's a good movie. Here's my likes and dislikes for Fire Island. I love the way they renamed everyone here. You knew exactly who everyone was supposed to be. I enjoyed all the characters, even if they didn't 100% line up to their Pride and Prejudice version. I love this version of Caroline Bingley. He's awful. The Kitty and Lydia being theater gays works a little too well, and kudos to these actors. They really nailed it. I don't know if it completely works mixing Jane and Charlotte together, but I do love this guy. He's great. Ah. Clever of them to have the phone break in order to keep the letter a letter, even though the letter is completely unfulfilling. Call it out in the narrative as much as you want. This still only took a week, which is not enough time. I don't know how I feel about the Darcy as a Darcy because he's not as much of a prick, but then again, it is a week. I totally get what they're trying to do by setting it on an island where every single person is queer, but by referencing outside homophobia and the pressures that it puts on the characters, it kind of undermines the point. They stole the Wickham plot from the Lizzie Bennet diaries.